If you guys didn't hear, Manny Pacquiao is going to be fighting Errol Spence in the welterweight division. So could we see Josh Taylor move up? And that could kind of be a super fight of some sorts for Terrence Crawford. Perhaps. I don't know what Terrence is looking for at this point. Everybody was kind of looking at this this Pacquiao golden ticket like he was Willy Wonka, and Errol Spence ends up getting the chocolate factory to get this big time fight. And so Terrence certainly is probably going to be looking for a big fight. I don't know where that ends up. Maybe Tiafimo ends up doing work in a couple of weeks, and maybe he's feeling super froggy and he wants to move up. I don't know. I mean, the one thing is that Terrence is at this point where he's super dangerous. It's a huge, huge risk for somebody. So you're going to need somebody a little bit crazy who wants to take him on. But also it's this arms race of who is, the true guy at welterweight. In my opinion, I think the better fighter is Terrence Crawford over Errol Spence. Errol Spence has certainly leaps and bounds in my eyes. I remember I was there live for his fight against Mikey Garcia. I just thought he showed a whole nother level to who he is. But he also can, as we know, has a bit of a reckless side to him outside the ring. So could that catch up to him a little bit faster than, certain things? And Terrence Crawford isn't young. So this is an interesting one from the standpoint of Errol's got a lot of pressure on this in this fight coming up with Manny. In the meeting is, I don't think a lot of people think Manny, has a shot. I think that people probably look at this and just say, well, this is too crazy to take on Errol Spence. I didn't think this fight was going to happen. I didn't think that Manny had to take this fight. I didn't think that Manny had to, prove himself against the Terrence Crawfords or the Errol Spences of the world. I thought that, it was probably likely he was going to end up fighting somebody like Conor McGregor. Somebody like that, like do a gimmick fight for a ton of money. Now, obviously, Conor lost to Dustin, so probably messed up some plans. This gives him something else to do in the summer. I think that it will end up doing really good business because it's the best opponent Manny's taken on in a long time. Errol's had some pay-per-view success relatively for him kind of just bursting out of the scene, but I think that this fight could be really, really commercially successful, especially just that Manny's just such a rock star, man. Like I don't know how to really explain what that guy means, but I was in the building for him versus Keith Thurman, and just the electricity that place had when he put Thurman on the canvas early in that fight. He just still has that ability, man. He just still has that ability to be a rock star and to sell things and to sell out. And the fact that at his age, that Manny Pacquiao in his 40s is out here trying to fight arguably the best welterweight on the planet, arguably one of the best fighters on the planet, and he's doing it months before he turns 43 years old. I just, how do you not just respect the complete balls on this guy, that he has the guts to go in there against somebody like Errol Spence, who people regard as a dangerous puncher, a guy who puts people away. Now, look, Manny has made a living out of beating bigger men. That's kind of his MO, is going in there and brutalizing bigger fighters. It's what he does. It's kind of his calling card. So I don't think he takes the fight if he doesn't think there's a path there to victory. I don't think this is just like, hey, I'm doing Al Heyman a solid here. I think that he had options, and that he's had a lot of talk in the past of what he thinks about Errol Spence, and that he sees a guy who's a little bit vulnerable. It's not like Errol Spence in his last fight against Danny Garcia blew the doors off of Danny Garcia. He took a relatively safe opponent, a guy that he was much bigger than, but it wasn't like the most pleasing performance. Now, you give him some of a break because, hell, he did it off of a car accident, so I don't want to nitpick too much on Errol Spence. But even the Sean Porter fight was super close. So we haven't seen a guy in his last couple of fights look like the dominant guy that he did, where I think everybody looked at him against Mikey Garcia and was like, whoa. But look, he's still a dangerous guy. He can go in there. He can break orbital bones like he did against Kell Brook. This guy is a super super dangerous fighter, and has talked about the willingness to go up and fight Canelo Alvarez. He's got the skills. I would say out of you think about the big guys that Manny has fought, and you think about somebody maybe like Antonio Margarito, maybe at his time where he's still off of the whole cinder block glove controversy, was still a little bit at the top of the peak of his powers before Manny went and broke his orbital bone. Obviously the Oscar De La Hoya fight where he beat down a weathered Manny, Oscar De La Hoya. Miguel Cotto naturally bigger than him. This is just a thing that he's gone on about and done his entire career, and has had just a ton of success for it. I just think that it's interesting that we're, a lot of people are clamoring for we're clamoring and are mad, I think, at Floyd Mayweather. It's I'm sorry that I got to tie the two together, but I don't have any problem with Floyd going and fighting Logan Paul. But imagine how crazy it is that Floyd would be going in there and fighting a Terrence Crawford or somebody like that. I just think he would do it. Now, there's a little bit of a difference. I think that Floyd has a pristine resume in boxing that he has to uphold or wants to uphold and wants to be part of his legacy. I don't think Manny really does have a ton to lose here. If he goes and loses to Errol Spence, he probably was supposed to. He's almost 43 years old. But if he wins and he gets that IBF welterweight championship, if he is the guy who becomes the unified welterweight champion of the world at 42 years old, I mean, what else could you say about the guy? The guy's already an 8-division champion. He's already a bona fide Hall of Famer, one of the most popular fighters on the planet, one of those entertaining fighters on the planet. Just watching his pleasing offensive style, the in and outs, his propensity to put people on the canvas. There was a lot of this talk over the years that Manny had lost his power. That Manny had been a guy who couldn't knock guys out. And I've always said, I'm like, yeah, but go back and look how many in those fights he's knocked somebody down. So you could go and you could say, oh, well, Manny, he doesn't have that knock dead power. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, I guess once you get to a certain point and you're not taking on junior welterweights anymore, it's going to be hard to knock guys out cold. You're not going to Ricky Hatton everybody. But go and look about how many guys he's just put on their ass. And that number that number goes sky high. He has an ability to get 10-8 rounds, to have a crowd behind him. It's a dangerous fight for Errol Spence. I get why he should be the heavy favorite and why I don't even actually know if he is the heavy favorite, to be honest with you. I should check the odds on that. Let's see. Spence, Pacquiao, odds. Let's see. Opening odds. Manny Pacquiao is a plus 350 underdog to Errol Spence, who's minus 450. Not surprising. Not surprising for you're talking about for a guy and the talents and the lineage that Errol Spence brings to the table. But man, it's kind of what Manny's been hearing his whole career. It really has been. And the way that he looked against Keith Thurman, if that guy could show up, now look, he's taking on a much better guy because Keith is on the other side of it. Keith is certainly not as dangerous as I think Errol is right now. Not as good as Errol is right now. And Keith talked about this in the lead up. Manny probably wouldn't have fought a 100% Keith Thurman. I don't think we've seen 100% Keith Thurman in a long time. But either way, he's still one of the best to ever do it. He doesn't look like he's quite lost his fastball. People are always going to be suspect of the chin just because of the Juan Manuel Marquez knockdown. It was 10 years ago. I mean, we're still going to sit here and worry about what Manny has as far as a chin is concerned. It's a crazy once in a lifetime punch from a rival who is juiced to the gills. So I'm excited about this. I there probably should be part of me that's worried for Manny and thinks that this is maybe a little bananas. I think it is a little bananas, but I just have such respect for what this guy brings from a courage standpoint to the ring. and it's awesome. Let's get to this heavyweight division in boxing. That was the big story this week as far as Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua is concerned. Just to recap what went down this week. So honestly, about a week from today, it was Tyson Fury who came out and said that the fight's official. We're on August 14th in Saudi Arabia. Me versus AJ, undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. We've all been waiting for it. Can't wait. Let's get to it. Finally. What do we have? We had Eddie Hearn on 3 months ago when we were talking about, it's going to be 2 weeks where we're going to announce this. Been spinning our wheels on this decision for a long time. And, not 24 hours later does a story come out and it says Deontay Wilder has been ruled in favor by an arbiter, and Tyson Fury has to fight Deontay Wilder, I think it was by September 15th, and has to fight before Anthony Joshua and him fight, which is pretty crazy. Because first of all, there's a couple of things that are nuts about this. One, the fact that I guess the general public didn't know about it. Like, I've heard a lot of boxing pundits discuss this now in the aftermath. Listen, I'm a guy, I got my nose, my big nose and my beak in the business of boxing pretty well. Obviously I'm covering a lot. I'm not like, covering it die hard like every day because I'm, covering Heat and Dolphins and all this stuff. Panthers playoffs are going on right now. So listen, understandably, some stuff slips past the cracks to me. I haven't heard jack squat about a Deontay Wilder Tyson Fury arbitration case. The last legal matter that I had heard was that there was a date that was set that they had to negotiate a fight for. They basically didn't, and that Tyson Fury was moving on and they were in the clear, just moving on, that they had the legal proceedings to do so. And that's what you would just assume. Like, if you are going through all of this stuff, right? If you're negotiating site fees and dates and where it's going to be and all this type of stuff, one would just assume that, okay, the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. Why would they be moving on if there was a chance that something legally could be blown up? So the fact that we didn't know about this and this wasn't covered very much, or didn't know that this was a possibility, is pretty wild, because I'm telling you, nowhere in the lead up to any of this stuff did anybody say, hey, by the way, there's still this pending Wilder decision. Everybody's telling you now, all of a sudden they knew. They didn't tell you about it. So I just want that to be pointed out as we're going down this rabbit hole. Second of all, it's not, the decision for the arbiter to rule in favor of it is also interesting. I'm definitely, I represent the Boxton law firm, but I do understand the idea that, hey, this kind of has been a while since these guys have fought. It seems silly that now we're at the point where a ruling is coming down. That's the other thing I find odd about it. So let me get this straight. The arbiter just happened to come down with the ruling right when it was decided that Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua were going to fight officially in August. The arbiter just happened to make the decision that week. That's pretty wild. I know Deontay Wilder is throwing out conspiracy theories lately, but that's a pretty crazy one. And I guess that the idea was that they could have paid some step aside money for Deontay Wilder. There was numbers. The only number I really saw thrown around was $20 million, which seems like a preposterous amount of money not to work. I got to be honest with you. I guess in hindsight, it could make you happy and not doing legal fees and all that type of stuff, but seems perpetually wild. And so basically what's funny about it is, so we took, I don't know, months upon months for the AJ and Tyson Fury thing to become official. And the Deontay Wilder Tyson Fury one got agreed to like that. Now, I guess because they already have a previous standing contract, that's probably why it didn't take as long. But they had like broadcasters, venue, all the stuff just set, ready to go. I just found it all very odd. So Tyson Fury ends up getting called out by AJ. AJ calls him a fraud. Tyson Fury challenges him to a $20 million winner-take-all bare-knuckle match. I mean, nobody's going to say yes to that. This is dumb. But it's a bummer. Look, man. The idea that we're not getting Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury right now sucks. I mean, it sucks. We were so close to getting the undisputed championship of the world. And I just think part of the reason I'm so disappointed in it is because, look, I am a big Deontay Wilder fan. I picked him to win both fights. I thought that I picked him to win the original. I certainly picked him to win the rematch. And the original, I thought, went kind of how most people thought it would go. It was like, yeah, Tyson Fury was going to outbox him, and Deontay Wilder would find his nuclear missile and find Tyson Fury's chin. Tyson Fury just happened to be touched by, the 8-count ghost, and boom, he was up. So you just got to give him credit for that. But that fight kind of went how I thought the fight would go. The second fight, I mean, it wasn't even close. I mean, he beat the holy hell out of Deontay Wilder. And Deontay Wilder did not look like he had any plan B, C, D, or E. Like, it was a complete mauling from Tyson Fury. And all that we've gotten in the aftermath is from Deontay Wilder is, the costume was heavy. Tyson Fury's gloves were played with. There was something in the glove that cracked my skull. There was something, the glove was open. It, cut my ear. Something was in my water. Mark Breland, my trainer, was on the take. Deontay Wilder just had every excuse under the sun for losing this fight. And that has really, I think, lost him a lot of fans. I think it's really bummed him out. Now, I can give him somewhat of a pass for not taking a loss. Well, it's the first time he's lost in his 34 years on this life at boxing, since the amateurs, I guess. But first time he's lost professionally, and having a hard time in handling that is understandable. It's just the wildness of being able to just, I don't know, ever accept the fact that maybe Tyson Fury was just better on that night. That's what's tough about it. And it leads you to believe, like, how do you think this guy is going to be able to beat a guy who he doesn't have respect for? How is he, in other words, how is he supposed to fix a problem against Tyson Fury and find a way to beat him if he doesn't really feel like he was beat, if he feels like he was cheated? And I think that's a dangerous thing for Deontay. If you were to tell me that Deontay Wilder, and I know that he's got a new trainer now and stuff like that, but if you were to tell me Deontay Wilder was working on something different or was working on his speed to, deal with the pressure of Tyson Fury, something, maybe that would give me a little bit more hope that he would have a better chance in this rematch. I just don't know how we've seen him now be beat basically twice, because he didn't win the majority of the rounds. I mean, I've been over this plenty of times in the first fight. Like, I think generously you could get to a draw, but you'd have to be really generous. And with the second fight, it wasn't even close. So just what are we to believe that he's going to do the next time around? Now, look, he certainly has the great equalizer in that right hand of his. He hits with more ferocity, with more power than anybody in the heavyweight division. Some think since Mike Tyson. Cool. But is he going to be able to do that against a guy who's bigger than him, who is a better boxer than him, who's lighter on his feet than him, who has better angles than him, and now appears like he's able to, out strongman him? It's tough. So I think that's the big problem with this is that, okay, we have Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder. I think that they'll have a great lead up. And if Deontay Wilder is able to sell all this conspiracy stuff, I think some people will still buy it. It'll still have a nice audience. It's still the heavyweight championship of the world, and it has a lot on the line. But it's not the fight we want to see, and that's disappointing. You know, we've been here now twice with Deontay fighting Tyson Fury instead of Anthony Joshua, and now we're here with Tyson Fury fighting Deontay Wilder instead of Anthony Joshua. It's disappointing. And now simultaneously, AJ now has to go fight and defend his WBO title against Alexander Usyk, which I imagine is going to happen because Usyk is repped by Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn, I imagine, wants to get a fight in for AJ. The WBO is calling for this fight to happen. We want this to be an undisputed title. The problem for him is, look, Alexander Usyk's no punk. You know, like Alexander Usyk is the undisputed cruiserweight champion of the world. He hasn't looked fantastic at heavyweight. You know, he definitely hasn't looked like the world beater that he was when he was in the lighter divisions. But he's really good. He is really talented. He does have a lot of skill. I still think AJ will win, but you know, we know this. Guys who are skilled boxers, guys who can move a little bit, who can be elusive. We saw that with Andy Ruiz. That gave him a little bit of trouble. We've seen it with other guys that they can get that chin and they can put him in a little bit of vulnerable places. Like AJ, to me, he's got just so many vulnerable. He's a supremely entertaining fighter, and you know is a great finisher, and you know really has some great stuff about him. But this is heavyweight boxing, and I do think that, you know, his propensity to get hit. We've seen his chin be tested and failed that test against multiple guys. And we've seen him in some cases get outboxed against certain opponents. So I just think that Alexander Usyk is not a walk in the park. Even if he hasn't looked fantastic at heavyweight, I think that I would like to see him in the ring there. Like, will he rise to the occasion? Like, we've seen that with Tyson. Like, Tyson Fury took on a couple of guys where, you know, it's kind of lackluster and his performances weren't that impressive, but sometimes the best opponents can bring the best out of you. And I think that with Alexander Usyk, I think that's the case, that maybe a test like Anthony Joshua can bring the best out of him. I gotta be honest with you, man. I really feel like we've been dealt a hand here that's going to end up with one of these guys, either Tyson Fury running into a Deontay Wilder bomb or Alexander Usyk boxing AJ's socks off. And these plans that we had of AJ versus Tyson Fury, and I know they're now punting it to December or November, I wouldn't count on it, man. I wouldn't count on it. Yeah, they probably will both be favored in both fights, and people will probably think, oh, they'll definitely win both fights. Man, we didn't think he was going to lose to Andy Ruiz, did we? You know? We didn't think Deontay Wilder was ever going to get knocked out by Tyson Fury. You know, maybe we thought that he was going to lose, but we didn't think that he was going to lose like that. And heavyweight boxing, it doesn't ever seem to do what you think it's going to do. And so I think that this is a huge deal what happened this week. I don't know how the hell Top Rank and Tyson Fury's side let this happen. It's a disaster as far as I'm concerned. Still fights. I guess we end up with fights that I will watch, but as a fan, I can't help but feel a little bit cheated because, you know, I thought by the end of the summer we were going to have an undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, and instead, you know, we don't. We ended up with two fights that we end up with a fight that we really had no interest in seeing in Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder, and then you have a fight with Anthony Joshua and Alexander Usyk, which think it's a little bit lackluster too. You went from, I'm sure, for the British fan standpoint of, you have these two guys from the UK fighting for the undisputed championship of the world, and now it's put on hold.